we're excited about it, that we're going to be honoring some outstanding people in the community. At the same time, this week, we were in kind of a strange situation. We are celebrating the birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King, who is the first and only private citizen to ever have a holiday named after him and to have a statue of him put on the mall in Washington, D.C. And so these are major achievements. And a number of things have been canceled. Normally at this time of year, we would have UAMIC's breakfast, which we can't have based on what's going on. The Jackie Robinson YMCA would have its annual breakfast and celebration on Friday morning, which normally had about 1,600 people. This year, that celebration will be online, virtual, starting tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. So you can go to their website or to our site and get the means of dialing into that. And then we would also have had this Friday on the USS Midway, Martin Luther King luncheon celebration. And of course, that celebration was canceled as well due to COVID and the spread that we have in our community. So the parade has been canceled. The fraternity is not doing it and gave notice before in terms of trying to get people together. And we are trying very hard to get through this situation that we're confronted with. And so, in the midst of this, the Voice and Viewpoint is publishing a special Martin Luther King commemorative issue. It is available online. It will be available in newsstands and by mail for those who subscribe. It will also be available over the counter retail. And so we'll be able to review some of Dr. King's highlights of his life, his outstanding speeches. And I think we need to really read things like the letter from the Birmingham jail, which is just so potent and modeled after the writings of Paul, the Apostle Paul, when he was in prison. And then I think one of his greatest speeches is the one that he gave in Oslo, Norway, when he received the Nobel Peace Prize. And we've reprinted that speech. We talk about the I Have a Dream, but there was more to that speech than just a dream one day. And so we have printed that speech as well and highlights from the life of Dr. King and his family. So we encourage you to pick up a copy and read it, share it with a young person. It's been some 50 years since, we lost him, and we don't want our young people and some of us to only think of Dr. King in terms of I have a dream on the mall and one day in the hills of Georgia and the being judged by the content of our character, not the color of our skin. We want to remember that he was a advocate fighter for voting rights, and it took that speech plus the follow-up action to get the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which now has been gutted, if you will, by the Supreme Court in 2013 and presently being harmed even more so by the voter suppression laws that are being proposed and passed in states around this country. And so we're coming at a time that the John Lewis Voting Right Act and changes that we need are more important than ever. And I would like to suggest that if we're going to truly honor Dr. King, let's get about the business of voter registration. Precincts are being changed, the alignment, and people are doing everything they can to make it harder. In Georgia, it's against the law to pass out food or water to people standing in line. In one county, 8 of the 9 voting precincts have been closed. We have the same kind of repression in Texas, and we have some 20 states that have done this. And so we want to, this evening, remember these things as we go forth, and we got a lot of things we want to talk about. I'm just honored to be here with Dr. Thompson and have him say hello so that I've finished that exposition.
Well, I want to jump in with you and also say that that the MLK Day is a day of also service. And so there are many service projects that are going to be happening throughout the weekend. I know that the Market Street Garden is going to be having a service project on Saturday from 9 to 12 on Market Street. and that's many projects around the country. Many times when people look at it just as a holiday, but for the celebration, it was designed to be also a day of service. So we want to make sure that people realize that don't just look at it as a holiday, but it is a day of service. And like you had shared with them, being a part of the voters' rights and helping to ensure that it gets passed, to be a part of decisions in your community, be it with homelessness or be it with education and literacy. We need to be more about the service and having the heart of Dr. Martin Luther King. And like I said, it is, you're absolutely right. It's more than just the I Have a Dream speech. And people don't realize that that speech that he did, he had done the I Had a Dream speech in many other places
Yes,
besides just on the
the
National
mall.
Mall.
Yes.
And so we need to really, really understand the measure of the man and the measure of the fight, but also realize that we lift him up as an iconic figure, but without the people, there would not have been this great leader. So we as a people have to come together and serve and really realize that the things that people died for and fought for are slowly but surely being taken away. And we think that we're here free, the land of the free and the home of the brave. And we're slowly but surely being complacent as everything is slowly but surely being taken away. So we have to open our consciousness. We as African Americans, we as people of color, we as people that live in America, and realize that you are fighting saying we want to be able to be mask free and we don't want to be mandated to have to be vaccinated. But at the same point, you are allowing your voters' right, the people who died for it, being slowly but surely taken away.
And you are so right, Dr. Thompson. I was 17 years old when he gave that speech. I was on the mall that day. I got there early in the morning. I climbed a tree like Zacharias in the Bible and got me a good position up close where I could see. And I mean, it was just amazing to watch the black people, especially who came, the women in their Sunday go to meeting, hats and gloves and shoes, and even though they were walking that distance, the men in their suits and ties, because we dressed out of respect for the occasion, and so this is important that we did that. But here's something else, Dr. Thompson, that I'm observing as we now have a president talking about how we're going to get a vote by next week on voting rights and all of this. You know what's missing today? What's missing today is there's no prayer in the lives of the people who were pushing for the cause.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. King had prayer as an integral part of everything that he did.
Mm-hmm.
The people with him prayed with him, and they prayed in strength and faith. These were some of the same people who lived to see Barack Obama become the first black president
Mm-hmm.
all those years later, which never could have thought that that would have happened. But we today are operating based on social media and false rumors. We won't take a shot because we want to act like we are doctors and scientists. We'd rather kill our family and our neighbors. We don't want to wear a mask because we got freedom and rights rather than being concerned about the lives that we impact when we don't do that, even if we don't get involved directly. And so this is just, it's a sickening turnaround, but it's a part of the collapse of America if something doesn't change.
Well, you know, Dr. Warren, I had an epiphany this morning while I was doing the other show, in the morning show, and the Lord just kept on saying, if my people which are called by my name would humble themselves and
Second
pray.
Chronicles
And
seven
so
fourteen.
I'm sitting up here and I'm like saying, okay, a lot of us are talking about learning how to live with COVID, but you know, he kept on saying we need to go back to the if my people. So if we're still struggling with this right now, we got to ask the question, is his people humbling themselves and praying? We've had time to do it, but have we found other things to occupy our time? So, you know, even moving forth in 2022, we have to begin to say, where's his people? And then when we begin to talk about his people, then we have to then humble ourselves and pray and then seek his face. See, there's these conditional things,
Right there,
you
Second
know,
Chronicles 7:14.
yeah. And then we got to seek,
Yes,
you know, his face, and then
right.
we have to turn.
Yeah.
You know, all of us have certain things about us that we know that we need to fix to get closer to God. You know what I'm saying? And then from there, he said, seek my face and turn from the wicked. Then you'll hear.
Well, let's put it all together
Yeah.
for him, Dr.
Yeah.
Thompson, because you're giving them elements of it. But it says, if my people who are called by my name would humble themselves
Mm-hmm.
and pray and turn from their wicked ways and seek my face, then will they hear from heaven. And so we know who his people are
Yeah.
based on their actions.
Yeah.
And we know that those who are prideful with their chest stuck out and talking about what can't nobody make them do, they are not his people.
Mm-hmm.
And so the burden of intercession falls on the rest of us, that we have to stand in the gap and pray for these people who have decided
Mm-hmm.
that they are more important than God.
Yeah.
And, the scripture says pride goeth before a fall. In this case, pride goeth before the trip to the mortuary.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what's installed when you consider the number of people who are dying and they're not vaccinated and they're taking up space and they're calling. Now we're in a crisis in this country like never before. We're in a blood shortage crisis.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's so critical in Texas, and there's people who need surgery. We got cancer patients here who need transfusions because of all the things that are associated with chemo treatment and what it does to your hemoglobin. And we're going to have people dying for the lack of care,
Yeah.
And the scripture says, my people perish for a lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
Well, in this case, they got the knowledge, but they just don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
And we can't be so weak and wimpy that we're afraid to speak up
Yeah.
and call it for what it is.
And then we also have to be careful that we don't get wrapped up in who is the messenger. Many times, we receive from one, but we won't receive from the other. And at the end of the day, in this season, I know God is saying that the kingdom needs to humble themselves and pray. And as we begin to pray, and my thing is that I think we spoke about it enough now. I think that everybody understands that there's a need. Now we got to go to that higher power. I was working with, and I said this, I was working with a person, and I felt as a counselor and as an advisor and everything else that nature, and as a doing some therapy, I thought that I could literally give them the therapeutic answers and counsel them through it and everything else that nature. And then one day God said, while you're doing all this talking and everything else, it's just like la 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 la.
Yeah, you're wasting your breath.
Yeah, he said, I want you to stop dealing with spiritual things in a carnal mindset. So I said, okay. So then I said, well, I'm gonna turn it over and I'm gonna deal with it in high places. And because of that, and because of the prayer life, and because of going before God, everything that I asked him to do in that person's life was done immediately when I moved out the way and let him do what he does. And so for all those that are out there that are, in this hold and I don't want to be told everything, I'm praying for you that God will give you a revelation like never before. And Dr. Warren, it looks like we have a caller today. So
Well,
let's just go right to the caller line
Okay.
and let's see. Caller, who's calling today?
No, this is Sean from South Sudan Center.
Okay. Do you have a question for the from the Destiny Editor show?
No, I just want to hear the program.
Okay, you can go to godradio1.com on your Facebook or on your YouTube page, and you'll be able to hear us live. Okay, thank you for calling. All right, well, we're back here, and let's see what else we have up here. We have a lot of good evenings from all around the globe, and thank you so much for tuning in. So, Dr. Warren, we've been talking about, the virus, the Omicron, and just the mindset that we have to start beginning to shift. Let's talk about what we saw today in our city. We basically had the state of the city by the mayor today. We had opportunity to sit and watch it together. What's your first thoughts about it?
Well, our mayor is always presidential, first and foremost. I thought it was excellent speech. It was well put together. He touched all the necessary bases, and especially in the order in which he did it, because we know that there's certain people who are only concerned about the environment, the water, the beaches, the infrastructure. So he did all of that first. And then he talked about housing, and he has made a difference in terms of housing. But a lot was being done on infrastructure before I give credit to where it's due by Kevin Faulkner's it made a big commitment to do that because of all of the pipes and things, and not just our city, but that's why the president did the Build Back Better because infrastructure was in such disarray all over the country. So the mayor did a great job talking about that, and he talked about the need for people to be safe. I'm concerned. He talked about the city, and we've got 80% of people vaccinated. But at the same time, we have folks who still don't want to be vaccinated, and we have people who have received termination notices because they refused. I have a real problem with the police department's attitude about what they're not going to do when they're one of the first lines of defense interacting and reaching people. They got people that don't want to be vaccinated, and they have the capacity to be transmitters. I've seen them in our community in certain places, even without a mask, like they didn't care. And so this is a real problem, this police department. And I want to say something else about the department too. You know, Black Men and Women United historically, and we've been at it for some since 2004. We've had over the years a phenomenal relationship with African Americans that were part of the police department, but still a part of the community, who came to our meetings and got involved and participated because they lived in the communities and they didn't let their uniform become an issue. And now we're in a situation where we have two young African Americans who are assistant chiefs on the 7th floor who seem never to know anything other than to give you a party line for whatever you asked. And recently, the police department, I guess they issued a directive that blacks within the department could no longer come on Black Men and Women United. A question was raised about their participation, and one of those individuals said they would come back when the people stopped calling them names. Well, I just want to serve notice that you don't have to come back. You don't dictate how this community responds when it's in pain and concerned about what's happening. I think you've gotten confused as to how you got your job and why you're down there. And maybe we need to have an action to cut the number of chiefs on the 7th floor by 2 and help you remember who you are. So, no, please don't come back. And I'm not going to pass up any opportunity to call you out and to deal with you and to deal with the fact that you think you can determine how we address our pain and our concerns. Your position is a job that you have. It is not you. And no one has ever asked you to violate that job at any time in terms of anything that's been said. And I am tired of seeing black folks who get their job so seriously that when people complain about elements connected to their job, they feel like they got to step in front of the master and take the blame. So please stay away, and we're going to deal with you the way we need to as a part of the problem going forward. And I'm glad I got that off my chest. But the mayor is standing there talking about how important it is for the police department to respond to citizens, to protect and serve, and how he wants to see that happen. And in many instances, he's fighting an uphill battle because he's got some folks there who basically, because of their union influence, take the position, we don't care what you say, we're going to do what we want to. And we're just not going to let that happen.
Yeah, and I think that the mayor, what I did like is that immediately after his State of the City address, he made available his comprehensive progress report addressing in the speech. He addressed homelessness. He also talked about leading San Diego through the COVID and the pandemic and its impact. He talked about building more housing and investing in infrastructure. I'm going to come back to the infrastructure piece because, I want to talk about materials when it comes down to infrastructure.
Yes.
And then he said a strong fiscal discipline, which is very important to keep our city strong, getting City Hall back on track, leadership on climate action, and then imagining policing and preserving public safety, which did concern me because Dr. Warren, he also said that there was an upswing in crime.
That's correct.
So we need to hit that. And then it said diversifying city leadership. Would love to come back to that piece. And then integrating equity, strengthening binational and global cooperation, and supporting our youth and serving the people of San Diego. So those were the highlights of his speech. We have it here and very, very well outlined. I did like the fact that even in this time of COVID and hybrid learning and hybrid presentation, he did it in the lobby of the convention center, which I thought was a very good backdrop.
And it was an important backdrop because the convention center, which was built and dedicated to tourism during this pandemic in the past 2 years, has played a pivotal role under his leadership in terms of addressing the humanity of what we've been confronted with. To open it to be a shelter, and I like to remind people that during the time that they had the 5,000 people housed there, at the height of the pandemic, before the vaccine came, they had very few outbreaks among the people who were housed in the convention center. And I thought it was very significant that when we were having all of these problems with the children who were separated from their parents under our previous president, that San Diego was one of those places that made itself available and got involved in helping to reunite and providing a safe place for those kids so that they weren't in a wire cage like the animals that they were being treated like in other parts as they were being flown here. So the mayor has done some mighty good things, and he's young and energetic, and he's a visionary. He's pushed to expand Wi-Fi because we saw what happened with our kids. They couldn't do that. And at the same time, he's respected boundaries, both in terms of the city council, in terms of the state legislatures, in terms of the county, because San Diego is a sovereign city in a sovereign county. So they can only work together. And he's made a big point of that. And so it's been a positive thing, I think.
So I'm gonna ask this question because I don't know if anybody else caught it, but I caught it when he started talking about sexy. You know, he used sexy a couple of times as he went through his speech, and I thought that for me let us also understand that our mayor was fun. He has a sense of humor, and that he was touchable and real. And I like that in the presentation. Yes, he did look very presidential, but he didn't try to gloss over what we're going through. I believe that he really just said, look, this is reality for us, and this is how we're going to work together to get through it. So let's just chop off the top. I do want to deal with homelessness, but I want to get down to this infrastructure. And I got a question for you.
Sure.
Is there any other material than asphalt that we can use for the roads that won't just pop up? You know, have we did any type of research or development of something that will hold up better over time to get rid of these potholes?
Well, you know, the asphalt situation, there is a substance that has been found to be better than asphalt. I can't remember exactly what it is. I remember when they put it out there. But you got to understand something about potholes. You know, many instances we see where they're actually digging up the street, putting in those blue PVC piping to replace the old cast iron that's gone bad. And so a lot of times it's the wheels and the vehicles that tear the street up. But it's not as bad here as it is back east, because
oh my Jesus,
what happens back there is when you have snow, which we don't have on the streets here, and you have the chains tear up the asphalt in terms of the streets. And so our problem is we just have these potholes that are cumulative over a period of time. They haven't been addressed as they should be, and we're trying to get they seem to be trying to get to them. But I think it's good. He has always proven to be touchable, down to earth. There's nothing pretentious about him. He talks about his humble beginnings and where he's come from, and his youthfulness. Sometimes you look at him, you almost think you're seeing a kid being mayor for a day, but he's very, very serious and very capable and very bright. And let's understand that he came to this job having been on the city council, having been mayor pro tem when the other mayor had to resign, and having served in the assembly. So he's done quite a bit. he is a colleague of the vice president, and that's the point. And the president pro tem of the Senate, Tony Atkins, they're all connected. So he's got connections in the right place. He's been to Washington to try to do more of consolidating resources coming to San Diego, and I think that we want to celebrate that.
Yeah, and when he talked about homelessness, he talked about you know nearly 5,000 San Diegans during the pandemic were sheltered to home, and Operation Shelter to Home, and then he said and completed more than 1,400 individuals as well as 43 families to permanent and or long-term housing, which is amazing. And everybody said, well, 43 is a low number, but when you are a family and you're looking for something to move from a shelter or temporary residence to permanent or long-term housing, that is a big thing for the stability and the growth of your family. And then he also announced that the state is coming down with $15 billion invested in homelessness, and we're going to receive 55 million of that.
Well, there are a couple of things too. You know, even the money that was put there during the freeze in terms of rents, the rental assistance, a decision was made to keep putting that money out by the city and the county until it was exhausted, as opposed to cutting it off on a given date. And so, and let us look at places like Crown Plaza in Mission Valley, which was the hotel was taken over as one of those sites to do isolation for people who had tested positive and couldn't stay in their living environments because they had multiple family members, and that's been one of the great threats to the spread of the pandemic, the people that are in congested households. And so, I mean, he's shown a sensitivity to all of these things, and he obviously has tried to work well with the county to make the difference, because those are not programs they necessarily have the dollars for. And I know more than 3 years ago, I was attending some advisory meetings in L.A. With the clergy and the homeless coalition there, and back here urging us to share our resources and do what L.A. has done. And so I see a lot of that happening, and that's important.
Well, one of the things that I also want to say is that a lot of his strategic moves also help create jobs or sustain jobs, because many, when the tourism went down, hotels were losing dollars. And so to take over certain hotels, and I thought what was really unique is that he just didn't take over hotels in certain areas. There were hotels just right out here, right across the street from our studios, was taken over. The Mission Valley area, other places that were available to help with this pandemic move. And so I applaud him on what he has done thus far addressing homelessness. Now, is there more that needs to be done? Yes. Are we still frustrated as homeowners or people that have people encamped behind their businesses or their place of residence? And also the trash and things that accumulate with them, the unsafe conditions for our children to walk through, especially in the Father Joe's in the downtown area. A lot of kids are walking in the middle of the street because they don't want to be on the sidewalk because of what they experience when they're on the sidewalk. So there's a lot of work still to be yet done, but I like the fact that he sees them and he's just not driving past them, but he is trying to come up with solutions, and his team is too. So I appreciate that.
Let's point out a couple of things on that point, Dr. Thompson, because under the former mayor, they really kind of messed up, and we had the hepatitis outbreak and spread because people weren't doing things. The mayor mentioned the old library down at 9th and E, and he mentioned it as a potential site for housing in terms of renovation. I thought that was an important observation. And what I've also seen down there is that they have start putting porta potties on the street where they have large encampments. And next to those parties, they have put 24-hour armed guards to work there, because that's what it takes to control that. And so that's made a difference in terms of people using public spaces for restrooms when we could have had restrooms all over the place. And it's so interesting that it takes us so long, because in countries like France, they dealt with this years ago, where they have these units where you can go in and shower, and when you leave, the thing sanitizes itself and gets ready for the next person in the whole bit. So this is important that he identified what's going on. Not only do they have the restrooms there, but I know down in front of the old library, and they did this in a number of places. They come through. The city has the trucks with the police department. They pick up the trash, and then they hose the area down.
Yeah.
Which is an important part of keeping down what happened when we had the
Yeah.
hepatitis
Yeah.
outbreak. And so I like also the fact that he mentioned that, and most people don't deal with this, and we've been dealing with this in southeastern San Diego. There are people who, under no circumstances, do they want to
Be sheltered.
accept housing, accept shelter. And I think he said something that was very unique here, and some people might remember it from hearing about Britney Spears, because he talked about the city attorney moving in the direction of conservatorships, which would give it authority over folks that are identified by the court as no longer being able to make decisions for themselves. And that's a very sensitive and delicate area,
Yeah.
but it shows that he's not leaving any stones unturned in terms of looking at how to be of help.
Yeah, and one of the things that, is really, I think that the city has it up close and personal is that because right connected to City Hall at Golden Hall is a homeless shelter, and they're sheltering people in Golden Hall right now with the bathrooms and the showers and everything else. And so they have to see that every day and figure out how do we continue to serve this population. But we're getting them off the street. I know that because I have families that are there. And so there's been a lot of provisions that are being made.
Well, this is true. There are, and so a lot is being done. There's still a lot more that needs to be done, and we're not stopping there. Let us not forget we got a problem right now with the schools. I mean, look in contrast at San Diego Unified, that is under a court order to stop the masks and the mandates, and then you look at a city like Washington, D.C., where Mayor Bowser instituted a requirement that everybody coming back to school had to be tested, and they had to wear masks, and that was a means of controlling what was taking place. Okay, so I mean, we have a crisis that could be managed if we could just get some of the false information and ego and self-righteousness out of the picture to address it. And the fact that the city extended the provisions for businesses to do the street locations outside and has become very popular. All of these things are important.
Well, I think that also that we have to also hold the school district, the county, and everybody accountable to start reporting the numbers of how many kids are coming back testing positive, how many schools are being and staff that are being affected. I know that just recently the school district is starting to bring more PPEs in and K9 masks and things of that nature. But the rules are starting to change, and we have to be very cognizant of that, because they're saying that if you even if you test positive but you feel okay, you're not feeling any symptoms, come to work wearing a mask. You know what I'm saying?
And it shouldn't be. That shouldn't be the case, and this is a problem. And so, in many instances, people are going to have to revert to some common sense approaches. I mean, we understand that many of the teachers were vulnerable. They are older. They have some of the pre-existing conditions that we've expressed concern about. And so people are not ready to step out there and continue to put themselves at risk. We are losing folks every day in terms of healthcare workers and the shortage and the crisis that's going on.
Well,
and we got to step up and just take some responsibility.
Well, as we continue on with the mayor and going through this, I do want to highlight that piece, because now we're finding out that people are going through, I don't know, COVID fatigue, but now even the first responders who we used to celebrate are now saying that they're being brutalized and mistreated and talked down to and things of that nature. And I'm like saying, I'm funny about this. I never ever mistreat a person that's going to bring me my food, because I don't know what they done did in the back after I done acted up.
Yep.
with them up front. So if you're going to be my healthcare provider, I'm going to treat you really good.
Yeah.
I might say
Should
something
be.
after I'm finished, but
Yeah.
but in the meantime, so I'm encouraging people. Let's be respectful to the first responders. Even sometimes when we're frustrated, we're tired, we're in pain. There is a way to go about it, and advocate for yourself in a way.
Dr. Thompson, I think we ought to let people know because we have a number of folks saying bring folks on camera. We don't.
No, that's just the app that's saying
Yeah,
that.
yeah, because we'll have the
Yeah.
capacity to
Yeah.
do that. But we do want you to know that you can call in, and we want you to have the number 858. Give it to them too.
858-251-6111. If you want to jump in on this conversation again, 858-251-6111. We're going to have the team put that up in the feed so that you can have it. And you can get on in on this dialogue. Please come with a question so that we might be able to answer it and have discussion. Now, back to the mayor. Said strong fiscal discipline. How do you interpret that?
Well, we got a number of things down there. We got people wanting pay raises, and they talked about recouping some monies from folks. We did see an advantage for San Diego. The stock market being up had a tremendous impact on the pension deficit. And I forget exactly how many millions it reduced it by as a result of the stocks going up because, when the market crashed, we lost so much money and the whole thing inflated. So we're supposed to be able to pay the pension off much earlier than we would have before. And so a lot of people are not that much concerned about that element. People are more concerned about what's going into their pockets, how much food is costing, what's happening with transportation. We got all these people working with NTS, and we got all of these elements going on. But, we still, on a Sunday, you can't get a bus to church without waiting on a schedule, unfortunately. And so we need more service. We're no longer a little country town. We need service just like the city that we are if we're going to have people step back and give up some transportation in terms of getting here. So there's just a lot to be done, and it's not all going to be done by the mayor. I think we need to look at what we need to do, jobs for our young people, okay, along with those jobs, transportation. I put forth an idea several times for almost like a universal youth employment program by the city, no longer just relying upon workforce partnership, but the city putting so many hours in each department and giving bus passes with the kids so that they can work and get the experience. Well, we got to do these things if we're going to address this problem.
Well, I'm going to jump in because he did say when he started talking about building enterprises, he mentioned the Imperial Corridor, the Valencia Park Corridor. I think that deserves a right of the kind of discussion because is it moving forward or is it still in litigation?
Well, he's talking about, let's help people understand where he's talking about. When you go to the Earl B. Gilliam post office, that whole development there, you see that land is graded for structures. Those structures were delayed after the post office was built because St. Stephen's Church entered into an agreement with a development entity from Arizona someplace, and they thought that they were going to get first digs at putting a facility there that was going to guarantee so many jobs in the whole bit, and none of that ever materialized. And it went through all kinds of changes and just fell by the wayside. And so now that's the element that he's talking about. And it's a question of what kind of businesses, because here's something that's happening. We got the Live Well Center coming in right there at Market and Euclid, and that's going to take up where the Tubman Chavez was. It's going to go all the way down to Brico. And what's going to happen with that is we're going to see a surge again in people wanting to build and to buy and invest. And it won't be people that look like us bringing the money to take those additional spaces. And so this is a problem. And so, yeah, we saw what happened on Imperial. All that time we had Saks. We had a group that bought it, and a certain person lost interest, and then here comes the developers. Next thing you know, there's an apartment complex, and just a few people made money. We had the same thing happen over on South 43rd Street, where the VFW was located.
Hmm.
And certain people in the community owned that land for years. They couldn't get the permits and licenses. Soon as they sold it to white developer, next thing you know, condos and townhomes are up overnight. So
So
these are issues that are not being addressed, and these are things that are blocking us experiencing some of the ownership that should come along with what's happening.
okay, so I want to talk about the whole energy of not just traffic congestion, but almost city view congestion. And I'm going to give you my example. Going up Division today, again, another church is gone, House of David is gone, and there's a multiplicity of apartments. I think it might be 4 stories of apartments, and it looks like it could at least house, I don't know, maybe 50 to 100 people or different units there. Um, Underground parking, all kind of things in there in that community that's mainly single home and families and things of that nature. Then we go down Imperial and we see this big monstrosity of a building right across the street from the trolley. Um, is there going to be a lot of eminent domain along the trolley line, getting rid of old stuff and building these high rises? Because coming past San Diego State right now, I literally am getting claustrophobic just driving because everything's so high now.
In every city, they're building large units, just like they did on El Cajon when they put those 300 units up there. That's near the post office.
Mm-hmm.
The area that you're talking about off of Division, that area, that property belonged to the Church of Christ that was there.
Mm-hmm.
And that House of David, that church bought that property, and the church sold that property to the people for the development.
Yeah.
Okay? And the pastor of that church lives in Alpine.
Mm-hmm.
So he's not even down here. And so this is what we have happening. People selling, going after the money, and not being really concerned about the community in the course of how much they can get or where the money goes. And you can see that same development structure coming down Euclid where you come off 94.
Yeah.
Those high-rise 4-story units, there'd be at least 3 of them there. Some of them are going to be, the mayor talked about that tonight. These are going to be apartments above businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see that in Washington, D.C. if you go down 7th Street, where there used to be big clothing stores and everything. Now you have housing above, and that's one of the big moves that you see taking place. So we got housing being built, but the question is, who's going to be able to live in it?
Exactly. And I think that that's the key thing is that who's going to be able to afford it, and then also the congestion in the area, and what are we going to add to the area to make it what I call the livable communities, because we're still, and I use southeastern San Diego, we still don't have a major sit-down restaurant like a Denny's or an Applebee's or something of that nature. My concern is that if this community is so valuable, if this community that has residents that spends millions and millions of dollars throughout the community, why isn't it that we have not really required those kind of things to be in our community?
Let me answer that for you. Some of it's going to be painful, but let me answer that for you. See, first of all, you got a cultural scenario taking place. You know, there was a TV series at one time called Cheers.
Mm-hmm.
And
everybody know your name.
Yeah, and Applebee adopted the theme from Cheers to get people into Applebee's, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And the unique thing about that was that the people who populated that bar, they lived there. It became an extension of home.
Mm-hmm.
And that element of the community always has reserved more money to spend for that social scenario. I think there's some lonely people out there anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what they do. Now, when the restaurants that have been put in our community, and I've written about this in the past 20 years, 99% of them have not succeeded because our community, we say we want the restaurants, but we never supported them on the scale that made it profitable for them to stay. Mm-hmm. From the one that was on El Cajon Boulevard that was up there to Magnolia, all of these different places, to the one that was right there next to where Sins was located at one point. They came in and did this beautiful arrangement like New Orleans and the food and everything. But the restaurants can't survive. Monroe's that was on University, they can't survive on people coming in once in a while, uh, every now and then for lunch. That's why some of the walk-up places that we have now, like Bow-Legged Barbecue or Bankhead, they're only open. The pandemic has been helpful. They only open like 6 hours a day. Bankhead, Tuesday through Sunday from 12 to 6, because otherwise we were not eating. Our culture does not take us in the happy hour. Our culture doesn't have them spend that. We saw that happen with Magnolia go under, and the restaurant that was there before Magnolia, and of course the Mexican restaurant that's there now. They're going to be all right, because I've never seen a Mexican restaurant that was really on that way closed, with the exception of the one in Mission Valley, the cantina that didn't reopen due to that. But the rest of them, they survived. So uh, why would people come and try to put a restaurant in our community when all of the history says that Church's Chicken, Popeyes, Jack in the Box, and McDonald's, that all of these places will do more sustainable business than a restaurant?
And here's my argument. My argument is that they didn't want to put a major store in there, but then they put Food for Less in there, and Food for Less, has a lot of people that use that Food for Less. I think that I have not seen to date, and this is just me, Dr. Warren, in my 56 years, I've never seen in our community, there's Sizzler. There is Sizzler. And I think that's the only one. And I remember there was a Sizzler on Skyline. But I don't think I've seen any other restaurant of that level in our community.
Well, let's understand something about a Sizzlers, okay? There's also was a Sizzlers out 15 off of Arrow, I believe. And that Sizzlers did not reopen. That franchise closed, okay? I've seen some other places where Claim Jumpers didn't reopen, but Red Lobster survived up north. And so this Sizzlers that we have there, black folks can be funny. I remember when Brooke Huxman was living, and he was trying to do everything he could with his restaurant on a Sunday to get black people to come there to buy food after church the same way they went to the white-owned restaurants. Okay? The Sizzlers there off Imperial is not owned by any of us. And for some reason, those elements can survive. Now, you've got in El Cajon, you have Golden Corral. Okay? The Golden Corral is struggling, but it really shouldn't even be open with the way they have gone back to serving food in the midst of the pandemic. And so we just can't say we're being unfairly treated. I've seen cities where we open grocery stores. Let us not forget, what's his name, Brown, who opened a market at 54th and El Cajon some 20 years ago, back when what's his name that used to own all of the liquor stores and the grocery stores, maybe, I think, when he had it, okay. And he took that location instead of Federal and Euclid. And he did all kinds of stuff there, His wife's family had owned a Mexican store that's still very profitable over off Ocean View. And he didn't last long in there as much as he tried, because the people would not shop there on a sustainable basis. Now, let's be real about San Diego. I've watched San Diego racism in terms of how it responds to blacks in businesses. I saw a person open an ice cream scenario, Baskin Robbins in Rancho Bernardo. And this lady was so proud that she had her little Baskin Robbins. And I gave her some advice the first time I saw that she had opened it. I said, you know what? If you had hired a white person to say that they ran the place and that you worked for them, your business would survive. But because you're black, it's not going to survive. And what did they do? They boycotted. She went out of business. And then when the white got the same franchise, now it's booming. So this is that subtlety in terms of the racism that we have. And we as a people don't think about it when we spend our money. So why is it that you can go off Plaza and find whole Filipino communities that are controlled because they spend money within their community. But you can't get us to spend money to help sustain ourselves, but we want to complain about what people aren't doing. And I'm going to call it like it is every time I see it as a black business owner, because we were the ones that brought the concept of a black chamber to San Diego, and we were the ones that made the investments and went through all of these things to get people involved. And we got to change our habits if we're going to complain.
All right, all right. That is a good point taken. I also want to say I'm going back to the mayor and saying I did like some of the things that he did say about leadership and climate action. I'm still out on the water treatment solution to getting us water.
Why don't you call it like it is? Toilet to tap. I'm going to stay out on it, okay? Because I don't believe in the toilet to tap. I don't care how much they try to dress it up and how nice they say it is. Even on a cruise ship, and people want to act like you're getting toilet water on a cruise ship. That's not true. Cruise ships have their own water purification systems that take ocean water and changes it. But I want to tell you that whenever I'm on a cruise, I carry my own water with me. I'm not drinking their water. I carry enough water to last me for whatever periods I'm going to be on the ship. And we need to start being conscious, because did you know that water that goes through a treatment system has an acceptable level of arsenic in it? Mm-hmm. Okay? And so a lot of our illnesses are because of the contaminated water that we're drinking.
Yeah. So I was out on that one, but I did give credit for that. And then it said reimagining policing and preserving public safety. I guess the question, we have, the problem with the ghost guns that are taking place. Have we really seen, and maybe it's me, have we really seen an upswing in gang violence or just violence as a whole?
Well, let's break that down some. First of all, the Board of Supervisors just passed a provision against selling parts for ghost guns, and it went about 3 layers in terms of dealing with the gun issue. Right now, we're going through a homicide scenario. If you paid attention to it, as I have over the years, it's cyclical. Between the months of January and March or April, we have an upsurge in violence, and a lot of it gets to be retaliatory and gang-related. We don't know. But everything that's happening is not a gang incident, like that young kid that was killed Thanksgiving in the backyard by a stray bullet, okay? And so we need to get to the point that it's not okay for people to have guns in spite of the fact that we have an element that wants to do more gun availability in a Supreme Court that's about to make a ruling that's going to make it easier for everybody to carry a gun any place in this nation. And we ought to go back and relook at some of these old movies like Tombstone and understand there was a reason that Wyatt Earp and them took the guns off the street. And here we're trying to put the guns back on the street. So I don't believe all of that about how concerned they are. I know the mayor means well, but I don't trust the police department.
Here's the one thing that I think that I want to focus on tonight is through intentional recruitment, the police department welcomes the most diverse group of new recruits in department's history. My thing is that intentional recruitment, are they using the vehicles that we have in our community to literally get out the word that they're recruiting, number one, and the requirements, and do we even have an element to really train our youth, our community, to get into the police department and also be successful in the police department?
Well, that's a tricky one, okay? The police department is advertised with us in terms of outreach to the community, should be doing that with all community papers, but it's all a question of how you present what you're marketing, And if you don't do anything else to market it, just like recently, they did an annual toy thing, and they brought all kinds of people together. But they never shared it with community papers that they were about to do this. And we just got to look at, you watch that word diversity, because diversity, what? Remember they had a special recruitment for women to get on the department. They didn't do any outreach to our community specifically to try to get black women to come. And even though we produced the first black assistant police chief who spent years in terms of the department. So let's be conscious about diversity. Diversity seems to mean everybody else. They got 1 or 2 blacks going into each of the academy classes. We got all kinds of standards of what people got to go through to even get in. And so we know that if you've been stopped or documented or whatever, just because you were walking down the street in the neighborhood and you were black, years later, you can't necessarily apply for academy and expect to get in because they're going to have records on you. So this is a long range conspiracy scenario that gives the illusion of wanting to be inclusive. And while we're talking about, let's not forget the fire department. In all 30-some years I've been here and on the Voice and Viewpoint, I have never seen an ad from the San Diego Fire Department asking to recruit black people to join that fire department. Not ever. Even when we had a black fire chief, even we have some black assistant chiefs, and we got these retired blacks in the community beating their chest about how great they were with the fire department. They never reached out to the community to replace themselves. And so here we are without that inclusion. So we got to start paying closer attention to what's going on.
Well, last but not least, because I know we're running out of time, supporting of our youth. He said secured $19 million in state funding to launch a hiring program to create meaningful pathways for young people to get jobs in public service. Now, a lot of times when we hear it through the
workforce partnership. And as long as all the money is coming there and they're relying upon them, the rest of this gets to be a joke. Workforce partnership cannot be the only source. The city of San Diego needs, and the mayor has started the process, a very active full employment program for youth. That's more important than a gang prevention commission where we seem to be afraid to get rid of. Okay. And I believe he wants jobs for our young people, but we need some policy direction. And he did make an earmark, and he's moving in that direction. But we need the city council to get more aggressive about making jobs available and making a part of employment like we had the earlier public service and youth conservation, the youth employment, to make those things a more important part of reaching our young people.
Amen, amen. Well, there's so much more to discuss with the speech that we got in the State of the City from the mayor. I do give him a strong B+ in presentation. You know, the sexy comment I give him an A on because I ain't heard that before. But I think that is very, very important that we continue to ask the questions, to continue to dissect this, because I think that there are openings for us to make impacts in our community. So, Dr. Warren, I appreciate the dialogue tonight.
Well, I do too, and we appreciate that we were able to do one of those things that they do after people make speeches, where we can come back and talk about it. We hope that folks will stay with this; they won't just let it fade. This is a year of involvement and action. And if we don't do it this year, we will lose the future and everything that we hold dear.
Well, this is From the Desk of the Editor with Dr. John Warren. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.